I mean, if we had an extra minute, that fight would have been ours. So it is what it is, man. Sad.
This man has to be the most delusional coach ever. This nigga really said 1 more minute and the fight would have been ours.
Think about why you're gonna get taste, all of you. Think about it. This is my assistant coach, this one. It's wrestling. So we don't want to try to get away from his wrestling. We want to him up in his game. You can't think that you're gonna beat my guy coming with one thing, and that's wrestling.
The night after UFC 319, emotions were still raw. And if you ask Coach Morné Visser, the only thing standing between his fighter and victory was time. If we just had another minute, that fight would have been ours, he insisted, shaking his head. The statement immediately set social media ablaze, with fans calling him delusional, overly biased, or flat out refusing to believe what they just watched. So today, I'm breaking down Morné Visser's interview, giving my honest reaction and asking the question, was he out of touch with reality, or was he just a coach defending his fighter after a crushing defeat? Now, for those who don't know, Morné Visser isn't just any MMA coach. He's infamous. This is the same man who has tased fighters at his gym for motivational purposes, turned training into a circus of toughness, and cultivated an image as one of the most eccentric personalities in mixed martial arts. Whether you think he's insane or brilliant, he's undeniably entertaining. And going into the matchup between Dricus Du Plessis and Khamzat Chimaev, Visser wasn't just confident, he was borderline arrogant. He talked about Dricus like he was untouchable, a 5-time world champion with a resume that no one could compare to. So how does a coach with that much swagger respond after his fighter gets dominated for 5 straight rounds? Let's dive into it. When the interview began, Visser actually sounded surprisingly reasonable. He admitted the loss was tough, acknowledged lessons needed to be learned, and even pointed out the tendency fighters and coaches have to blame referees when things don't go their way. For a moment, it seemed like he was going to handle the defeat with humility, but then came the look, that trademark smirk of his that says, "I don't care what you think, we're still better." And from there, the interview spiraled into the classic Visser cocktail of excuses, confidence, and chaotic honesty. He criticized referee Marc Goddard for not standing the fight up more often, arguing that Khamzat wasn't doing enough damage. He brought up stats showing that out of hundreds of strikes, only a fraction were considered significant. In his eyes, Chimaev wasn't dominating. He was stalling. And if the ref had forced more stand-ups, things would have gone differently. Now let's pause here. Was Chimaev playing it safe? Absolutely. Was he still completely in control? Without question. The idea that the fight would have flipped with more stand-ups is wishful thinking at best. But that's Visser. Even when conceding defeat, he refuses to believe it was definitive. As the interview went on, we got more insight into what was said between rounds. According to Visser, after the first frame, he and Dricus were laughing in the corner. Why? Because they thought Chimaev had shown his best. That's all he's got, Visser recalled saying, confident that the relentless wrestling pace wasn't sustainable over 5 rounds. Except, of course, it was. Chimaev chained takedown after takedown with minimal effort, never once looking gassed. This is where Visser's perspective really starts to sound shaky. He kept insisting that they expected Chimaev to change strategies, maybe strike more or mix it up. But why would he? The first round already proved that Dricus had no answer on the mat. Expecting him to suddenly abandon a path of absolute dominance made 0 sense. It was rinse and repeat, and Chimaev executed it flawlessly. Visser admitted by the 3rd round he told Dricus, "We're down 3. His solution? Maybe Dricus should try to take Khamzat down. To which Dricus replied, "Coach, he's too slippery." That exchange says it all. When your only adjustment is asking your striker to out-wrestle one of the most dominant grapplers in the sport, you're out of ideas. Then came the topic of a rematch. And here's where I actually respect Visser. Unlike many coaches who would demand an immediate do-over, he flat out said, absolutely not. He admitted they were too far behind in the grappling department and that until they closed that gap, a rematch would be a waste of time. In fact, he went as far as to say they wouldn't take that fight again anytime soon. That honesty was refreshing, even if it clashed with some of his earlier bravado. But then, just when you thought he'd made peace with the loss, Visser circled back to one of his favorite talking points. On the feet, Dricus was winning. Every time he touched him, he wobbled. Every kick, every punch, it all landed. He claimed they dominated the stand-up in every short exchange that happened. And sure, in those rare 30-second bursts, Dricus did land some clean shots. But when you're controlled on the ground for 24 minutes of a 25-minute fight, saying you won the stand-up is like bragging about winning the warm-up lap in a race you lost by miles. This is where Visser's delusion creeps back in. He talks about almost submissions, close moments, and how one more minute would have been enough. But the truth is, Khamzat wasn't panicking. He wasn't scrambling. He was cruising. And while it's true Dricus avoided serious damage, a swollen face from 500 annoying punches isn't exactly a moral victory. By the end of the interview, Visser doubled down on his hatred of losing. He said he screens fighters who want to join his gym by asking how they handled defeat. And if they say things like, "It happens," or "You just have to," accept it, he turns them away. "I hate losing," he said, and he meant it. You can tell this loss burned him as much as it did Dricus. He even claimed they started planning changes the very next morning, looking for new training partners, blankets as he called them, who could replicate Chimaev's suffocating style. The irony, of course, is that no one replicates Chimaev. You can bring in the best wrestlers, the best jiu-jitsu guys, the toughest grinders, and none of them are going to match the combination of power, explosiveness, and technical skill that Chimaev brings. Visser says he knows exactly what to do moving forward. But unless that plan involves recruiting someone like Craig Jones and completely reworking Dricus's defensive grappling, the reality is they'll never catch up. And that's the harsh truth. I like Dricus. He's tough, he's entertaining, and he's earned his spot as a top-level fighter. But the gap between him and Chimaev isn't closing with minor adjustments. His only real hope of regaining a belt is if Khamzat leaves the division. Otherwise, it's an uphill battle that may never end in his favor. Still, I can't help but admire Visser's passion. Yes, he's delusional at times. Yes, he clings to excuses. But he's also brutally honest in ways most coaches aren't. He admitted they weren't ready, admitted they were dominated, and admitted they need drastic change. And that combination of denial and truth makes him one of the most fascinating figures in MMA. So was Morné Visser delusional? In some ways, yes. But in others, he was refreshingly grounded. And maybe that's what makes him so entertaining. He's the coach who will tase you in training, laugh in the corner after a bad round, and still smash a locker room with a baseball bat after a loss. He's chaotic, unpredictable, and utterly authentic. At the end of the day, he and Dricus are united by one thing. They absolutely hate losing. And love him or hate him, you know Visser's going to drag his fighter back into the fire until they either burn out or rise again. By the end of the day, here's the reality. Morné Visser is equal parts delusional and brutally honest. On one hand, he's talking about stand-ups, almost submissions, and how one more minute would have changed everything, which simply isn't true. On the other hand, he's also one of the only coaches willing to admit that they got dominated, that they need drastic changes, and that a rematch right now would be a disaster. That's why people love him and hate him at the same time. He's chaotic, entertaining, and unpredictable. And say what you want, Morné Visser never gives a boring interview. As for Dricus, the path forward is clear but brutal. If he wants another crack at Khamzat, he'll need years of grappling refinement, probably under someone like Craig Jones, and a complete evolution of his takedown defense. Otherwise, the only way he holds gold again is if Chimaev leaves the division. That's the harsh truth. But one thing's certain, Dricus and Visser absolutely hate losing, and that fire might be the very thing that keeps them alive in this division. Love them or hate them, they'll be back. And I guarantee we haven't seen the last of this duo. And now I want to hear from you guys. Do you think Visser was being realistic in this interview, or was he just making excuses? Was there any world where one more minute would have saved Dricus, or was this pure coping? Drop your thoughts in the comments because I'll be reading everyone. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want to see more honest takes on the biggest UFC fights and interviews, make sure to hit that like button, And don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives like this every single week. It really helps the channel grow, and I appreciate all the support. Until next time, stay safe, stay sharp, and I'll catch you in the next one.